This is video 1, PCSAE certification video series, specifically looking at the first part of the PCSAE blueprint, which takes us from, it's domain 1, so it's playbook development is the overarching. So we're going to look at conceptualizing context data, summarize the difference between inputs, outputs and results, outline how to use loop sub-playbooks, differentiate between playbook task types, use filters and transformers to manipulate data. And then that will take us in then to domain 2, which is to go on to talk about the instance types, indicator types, layouts and fields. So beginning with task 1.1, which is conceptualize context data, we're going to start to talk a little bit about how we get data into it, how that is represented, and how you can visualize it. So if we now come from here, this is the incidents tab. If we can have a look, we can go to dashboards. Reports are all disabled because this is the community version. But we can see here we've got 4 unassigned incidents. These have all come from the sample incident creator, which we'll look into later and look through how you then investigate and go through. But for this particular instance, what we're going to do is we're going to look into the playground. The playground is where everything is executed. Each playground is separate to each incident, so you have a running commentary, if you like, of the incident and the information and data that was contained within. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at running a command using integration, and then see how that is presented in the context data. Okay, so what we're going to do a whois command. You'll see that it auto completes. Put the query in, press enter, and then it does that. Okay, and then that queries it, and then that comes back with all the domain information from whois, which is the whois integration. So that's all there in the war room, in the playground war room, whichever way you look at it. But the context data behind that, once we view the context data, we can see that it's in JSON format. The dbot score is that it's usually reliable, score 0, it's absolutely fine. Domain, and we can use all these later on to grab to put into an incident. The admin, the name servers at the bottom, 60 items at the bottom, and then there we have the JSON that we will then grab from there to populate our fields. Okay, so that's how it is in the background. That's how it's displayed there. If you want to mark any of it, you can mark as a note, and then that changes it to green. This is a note. As you're dealing with incidents and you're going through the incident, you can keep a running log of notes and artifacts just by doing that, and then at the end of it you can download the entire incident. So rather than trying to keep a timeline of what was said where and what information was gathered, this will do it all for you automatically. You can unmark the note, it's fine. You can view the artifact in the new tab, which is what we just did. You can attach it to a task and you can download it and add tags to it. Okay, so that's essentially the data. That's getting data into an incident, and then you can see the context data as it was there. So we talk about differentiate between public and private concepts. So sub-playbooks are playbooks that are nested within parent playbooks, such as this one here for traps. So within this playbook, based on the outcomes of these, it will run these, and it will run them for the downloaded files. So it will run in a loop until there's no files left. Essentially, when we look at the sub-playbook, we can see there's shared globally or private to sub-playbook. Private to sub-playbook basically means that you don't want this playbook to be affected by outside changes, so you don't want the context of it to be affected. You don't want it to be changed. It only operates on the inputs that it receives from the parent. Global is when the context in the parent playbook should be considered and accessed. However, it should be noted that a change made to sub-playbook will impact the parent playbook at the next run of the parent playbook. So you have to be careful, because you are going to change the nature of the parent playbook. So based on the theory that you're going to run a playbook and an automation to start off with some data that you've received and then process it in a certain way, playbooks have an input and an output and results for playbook tasks. So 1.2 within this domain is to summarize the difference in inputs, outputs and results. Fairly simple and easy, to be perfectly honest. So this playbook here, the IP enrichment external, look at playbook triggered and we can see that we've got the inputs and the outputs. So the name is IP, and this is where it's get IP.address from the context information, no filters applied, transform as unique. So if there's multiple IP addresses that are replicated, it'll only grab the IPs that are unique. So it's the IP address to enrich. You can see all the other information, the description about what it does, CSV list of addresses, IP addresses. Use this list to check if an IP address is found within a set of IP address ranges. So then we look at the outputs, and this is what we're going to get at the bottom here when it's run. And we're going to get the context path, IP, and then get the IP address object. So dbot score, it's going to run the dbot against it to get the IP report, and the endpoint OS, endpoint operating system, is all going to be done within here. So essentially that's the inputs and the outputs. This is what we want to start with, and this is what we come out. So from context data, two different things. So from context data, it tends to be from incidents, whether manually created or as part of a integration, and then from indicators, it says get indicators from query results. So if you query something, or you've got an indicator that you're hunting or something like that, then it would come through that. Okay. So let's move on to describing inputs and outputs for sub-playbooks. So playbooks are divided into two categories. They're basically the same, they serve different purposes. So parent playbooks are the main playbooks, and they're the ones that are triggered by an investigation or as part of an integration that's created an event. So that will be these, and that's how these start. Sub-playbooks are the ones that have got an input and output, always got input and output, unless you want it to remain within the playbook itself, which is pointless. So in this particular instance we have the phishing investigation generic v2, which is a parent playbook, and then within that we have the sub-playbook. Then we can see the inputs here, get the file, instant.labels are email, instant labels cc, instant labels email from, and then it takes all that and runs it through this particular playbook, and then we've got the outputs that we can see there. So that then comes down and is used by these two here. So in the inputs, get the file, because it's extract indicators from file, detonate the file as file entry ID, so that is going to take the file from the context data and it's going to detonate it, and then after that it's going to give the analysis status, and here we can start to see as well where this is going to do it. So dependent upon what type of integrations you've got configured. So we've got Joe.analysis, which is a file detonator. It's a service where you can detonate files, and that gives it file.malicious, the vendor that made the decision, the description. And then if we move further down, we can see here that we've got Wildfire. So if you've got Wildfire integration installed and Wildfire subscription, you can send it there to be detonated, and then this is what it will come back with. So the status of submission, which is benign, greyware, malware, and phishing, I believe, if I remember correctly. Cuckoo.task, sandbox, and so on. So that's essentially the difference between the inputs and the outputs for sub-playbooks. So now we get to the fun part, or one of the fun parts, which is the configuring of playbooks. Obviously, with XSOAR, you get many playbooks already installed, as you can see in a minute. Okay, so these are all the playbooks that come with it already, and then as you download integrations, they come with their own playbooks. So for instance, if we go to the marketplace and just pick any random anyone, why is it you can never choose something when you... So that's got one integration, 4 commands, and those are the commands that come with that. Of course, I've picked the one that hasn't got any playbooks associated with it, so if you give me 2 seconds. One playbook, there you go. So if we downloaded if we installed Okta and then created a instance of it, because installing it doesn't actually mean that it's there, it just means that it's ready. It then needs installing, you need to create an instance. So within this pack comes the classifier. So you have the AppSync classifier, the AppSync mapper to map that data to respective context fields. It's all done in JSON. User profile, incoming, outgoing. Then your integrations there. So those are the integrations that you've got. So that's deprecated. And 23 commands as well. Use the Okta V2 integration instead. So IAM, identity and access management, and then it explains what it's about. So integrate with Okta's identity access management to execute CRUD operations. 10 commands, and then Okta V2 authentication, cloud-based identity management service, and you got integrations there. I mean, so these can be used not only for, let's say specifically in the case of Duo, it can be used to use two-factor auth for people logging into Cortex, but you can also then from here say, so you can see here, return single user to active status. So if they're suspended pending investigation or during investigation, you can return them to that. Suspend user, activate user, deactivate user. Okay, so there's literally nothing you can't do with it. And then you have the playbook, and it gives you a very thorough description of what the playbook is. Okay, so that's the playbooks that you can get. And so if we come back to playbooks, in its own time. So there's a couple of ways you can create them. If you see that these are locked, so the only way you can't edit a pre-installed playbook or a playbook that comes down with a content pack. So if you want to edit one or want to use it and just change it to your own, you have to just pop up to here, duplicate it first, and it will come with a duplicate. Just rename it, duplicate demo, and then save that one. If you want to then change that, so if we go to here, you can now see that you now have the ability to edit it. If you want to change that to active users D2 for instance, and that'll do that. Now there's two ways of doing this as well, just to point out. So there's save version and then there's the save. Save version is what it says it is. It gives you the changed create sites report for one that will not work. So update and exit, and then we have the ability then to go back and look at the version history of that, and then we can modify any ones that, so if you then do that and then it doesn't work, you can go back and you can restore the one before, or whichever one is the known working one. If you save it, as in save just with the save icon, then that just overwrites it. So there's that way, or if you're feeling brave, you can crack on and start from scratch. So you have playbook triggered, and then you've got automations, manual tasks and playbooks. If you want to use automations, you really need to make sure, so if we wanted to use PanOS for instance, then we've got all these commands we can do. So run any command supported by the API. So we add that. Hang on. Playbook. Right, and then in here we have the inputs. So the action is edit, delete, clone, all the stuff you'd get from the API. So anything that's in the APIs you wanted to show, and then you have the command category, sorry, and then the command. So there you can take that from the context, or you can just type it in. And then you would, sorry, okay, and then you would link it in there, and then just link that to that, and that's okay. Important, of course, to remember that if you're doing that, you need to make sure you've got the integration installed. You can then create a choice. A choice task. So we can create a task. If we just bin that, create a task, and then it's conditional. Task name is PanOS installed, and then you would look at modules details, configured integrations, and then you would look for, sorry, you would look for PanOS, else if we do that. Okay, so if PanOS is installed, just pop that down there, make that the condition for yes, and then if we want to add an end, so one of these, section header, oh, spell it right, do that, right there, and then this, a join up to there once that's done, but our else case is marked there and then closes that. And then you can neaten it up using this. It looks nice. Sometimes it really does screw it up, but in this particular instance, I think it looks okay. Okay, so then you can and you do the same again. You can save your versions on that, and then it's all down to debugging and working it out. And that's basically, you can then do that. You can build it all the way through like you would with anything else. It's completely configurable. It's completely in your command. I mean, just infinitely usable. Well beyond the scope for this particular video, but you get the idea. Then of course, once you've created your playbook, you need to then be able to run it and test it. And there's several ways you can do that. So if you have an existing incident, so if I go to incidents now, okay, just pick this one. So this is how far down the playbook that is associated with it, which you'll see in a minute once my slow box catches up. Malware Investigation Manual. As the name suggests, this one is now attached to a manual playbook. So what we have as well is we have these little symbols here, and just to quickly run through them, so if you end up with a green tick there, that means it's all good, it's completed, it's fine. If you have a timed task and it's orange, it means that it's overdue. If you have a red one with a little triangle in it there, I mean that's relatively self-explanatory, but that is warning, error. Waiting for manual input, use this one, and then you click on it, and then you can create your manual input, or you can choose an automation. So if we wanted to, let's see, what's that one actually called? See if we can do this. So get employee information, get device profile. Can't really do anything with either of those because this event didn't really have anything we could run that against. But that's how you do it. So you do it there. You would create your task, choose automation that you're going to do. So in this particular instance, it would be user enrichment, I imagine. AD get user, something like that. And task description, and then save and run. Or you can run a playbook against it as well. So you could choose a playbook. So there you go. Active account enrichment, generic v2, and then it take the account or username from the context information that we saw before, private sub-playbook, and run it. Okay. Yep. Whilst these are running through, you'll see a blue bar here with cogs turning, means it's all good. If it goes greyed out, it's been skipped. So in the case of a yes or no, a conditional statement, if it's gone yes, then the one that was for the else condition will go grey, and vice versa. If it's incomplete, it's white. There's been just an incomplete error, it just doesn't work. Missing automation or disabled integration is white with a little red triangle there with a lightning in it. So that means it's hit something and it hasn't got the integration to run it, or it's disabled. Okay, so learning how to read those is something that's quite important. It is, again, it's actually quite intuitive, because if I can get, let's see if I can get an example of one that errors out. Right, so running that, the same sample incident that we had before, but against this playbook, because I know I haven't got that installed. We see that it runs through OK, endpoint enrichment, and then it gets to here and it's errored. It's not always the case, because sometimes it'll error out and it's relatively obvious as to why. So for instance, if something is add to list and the list doesn't already exist, it'll error out. But in this particular instance, it couldn't find any modules to run for command XDR get endpoints. That is because I haven't got XDR integrations installed. So you can mark it as completed and move on, and it will go green. That is a manual task. So retrieve file from XDR. Obviously we've got nothing to retrieve it, But again, it's the same thing. You could do that, create a task, choose automation, no point because we haven't got one, mark that as completed, and then you can see that's gone grey because it hasn't detonated the file because there's no file to detonate. And then awesome, all tasks are done. Just to give you an idea, so if you then wanted to change your mind and you wanted to run that against another playbook, you can come up here and pick any playbook you want. Go to that one, just as a random one, and then you can see that it's starting to work, but I'm going to have to be really careful because I'm going to lose all my commands. So within this, you can see we've got, is an email address to check? No, in this particular instance, because that's grayed out. Do we have URLs? No. Do we have IP addresses? No. Do we have MD5 hashes? Well, we have an MD5 hash. So we've got a debot score from that. And then if we go to the war room, we can see all the results from that. Here's set incident. We can see where the task errors came in, and then if you hit on show reason, missing argument for set incident, brute force investigation, generic execution error. Generic execution error is probably because the required integration wasn't there or something was missing. It's a little bit Microsoft with, yep, we don't really know what happened. And going all the way down to the bottom, then we get to where it was talking about the hashes. So we've got the hashes, and it's got the debot score, and score is 3 from Wildfire. You can see it's used 146 commands to get there. So we've got the indicator there, and then that can be added, mark as evidence. Then you can put a description down for the evidence. It's come from the automation, mark as evidence, but obviously we haven't put one in. Or mark it as a note for later. Okay, so that's really how you do it. If you want to, if this then becomes really clogged up and you want to get rid of it, so if we want to erase this, playground create will erase the playground. See, it's all, yeah, we've got 75, and our new playground is there, so playground create. And then so that's it. So that's you can run it. So you can test automation scripts, test your APIs and commands, and so on. That's testing your playbooks as you go through. If you want to test it with just, so I'll show you just quickly this one. So servers and services. So if we go then to example, so this is the instant generator. There's no commands for it because it is literally what it says it is. And if you set it to fetch instance, it will fetch instance of random types and then pass into your instant queue to be dealt with to practice on. It's free, as are majority of them. It's free to run, and it is very good because it gives you plenty of opportunity to work with XSOAR and to understand how it's doing what it's doing. Let's now move on to outlining how to use loops in sub-playbooks. So you may have a number of inputs from the parent playbook, and you need to run your sub-playbook per input. So you can do that by come to here. You see the inputs that are in here. It's not really necessarily what you do here, but just to demonstrate the looping options. So none is it doesn't, obviously. Built in is exit when a value. So if you wanted to go to extension, file extension equals zip, so it'll exit when it hits a file.extension equals zip. You can do that. if you want to go to for each input, so iterate over all defined playbook inputs, so you look at the inputs tab here, and then you'd see which ones it's going to go over. Or you can choose a loop automation, and that is our values equal. So in this particular instance is if left is equal to right, if left is not equal to right, then it will stop, and then you maximum iterations and sleep will make that fairly intuitive. Check value is error exists, and that's how you control the loops within sub-playbooks. So if there are multiple input lists with the same number of items, then the sub-playbook will run once for each input set. So for example, if you have input 1 and input 2, input 1 will run with input 2. So it will go through input 1, it'll iterate through input 1, and then it'll iterate through input 2. The sub-playbook will run once for each item in the input with more items. Once it's done that, then it will move on to the ones with subsequently less items until it reaches the end. So we're going to talk a little bit about differentiating between the playbook tasks. So there's different types of tasks. There's standard tasks, there's conditional tasks, and then there's data collection tasks. So if we just go to add a task, so we put in here so it doesn't whinge at me. So a standard task is choose an automation, run the automation. You can assign an owner to it. SLA, set task reminder. Conditional is as it says it is, so you create the either built-in condition for yes or no. Manual task, so that's basically as the analyst is going through it, they then decide one way or the other. Choose an automation, so you can choose an automation to our values equal in this particular instance. So if you had two values, compare them, and then that goes one way. Or else check a value. If a value exists, so it's a boolean. If a value exists, then yes. If not, then it's on the else case. Ask is you can ask by email, and that emails, as it says there, select the communication channels. You can email so if you go into here, and then you get playbook inputs and the incident details. If you find an email address in here, CDE, so an email, so the email address, instant.email address, or the email that it was going to, or the BCC or the CC, then you would be asking that person there, and then you can create your subject line, create a message body, and then reply options yes or no, or you can add a reply option. Okay, hang on, I don't want to do that, do I? So that's one way of getting the information back. So that is the ask task. So then they would reply, the person who's in there would reply. There is another way of doing it. I keep doing that, and that's really annoying, and that's data collection. Data collection is slightly different. So we can, for data collection, tasks can be selected for surveying users. So if we want to create a survey, this is how your email will look. Link will be placed there, and then they'll go and they'll complete a survey. Link to the web form will be placed automatically at the bottom of your message. So you ask your question there, there's your message there, and then the user will get a link to click on to go to an unauthenticated survey. So they don't have to authenticate, don't have to log in or anything like that, and then you will receive the information back through that. Both are fairly valid, and you can use that for subsequent playbook tasks. You can store it as evidence or anything like that. So those are the main task types. Section headers are the top and bottom, so you can select a timer field. add a trigger for it, so that's when the timer starts. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's it. So then, of course, we have to accept that data and alerts and so on coming in varying forms, and they have to be made to be as useful as possible. So we get into 1.5 actually is this, and it's the last one, and the last section of the first domain is basically going through using filters and transformers to manipulate data. And what they're going to want you to do is they're going to want you to be able to explain the difference between the two. Now, it is relatively intuitive, but I find the classification editor to be the best way of describing it. So when you're creating your classification, you will come into the classification editor, and then you can pull from an instance, or you can upload JSON files. In this particular instance, we've got a log file from my firewall, and what I was attempting to achieve was, when the log comes through, we see threat in all of them, but then we see packet, and that is the log that is for port scans and such like. So it's coming from the zone protection profiles and the DDoS profiles. Okay, so the best way to get to that now, because so from there I've then linked that to an incident type, because the result is packet, as you can see there, and then I've dragged that down to there, and that's linked to external scanning, which then goes on then to run any logs that come in as being that incident type. So how do we get there? We come up to here. So we're going to get the content field, which is there, which you can see is just a complete string. Well, it's comma separated. Okay, so to get that, you would go to the keys, because those are the keys there. Remember, this is JSON. Go to the keys, then get the content. It's very straightforward. And then filtering. So filtering is to get, as it says there, the subset of the data. So basically, if you're looking for a particular file type, PDF or something like that, in this particular instance I'm looking for, within content, I want it to match the regex of packet. Okay, and these are the other options you've got. So content contains a string, is empty, is not empty, includes, if anything's in the list, if it's true or false, it can all go in there, and then you can use that to match to get the specific part of the data you're looking for, and then transforming it. So this is literally just where I'm just transforming it to packet. In this particular instance, it's not much use, but where it would really shine is if you were specifically to be looking for a zip file, for instance, then the best thing to do is to say I want to get zip, but you want to change all your content matches to uppercase, because then you don't have to put in zip in lowercase and uppercase, and that will automatically do that, change it to that, so you can filter on the one thing. So once we've done that, we can test, and then we drop out to this. So we see our test sample here, click test, and then we can see that we come out with packet. Done testing, okay, and then drag that to there. Okay, it's difference between filters and transformers really is that. So if we're looking for file extensions, you can then filter on that. So if you're looking for any specific part of that data, that's your filter. You get in the key, and then to apply the transformer to that, which is to make it more, it should make it easier to manipulate the data, so you get less misses, because you're not having to think of every iteration of that particular data because you've transformed it or something else, or you've transformed it into a type that you require as opposed to a type that you don't, and then that can then be used within playbooks going further down. So quickly to run through it, so the filter categories are Boolean, which is determining whether a field is true or false, or whether a string representation is true or false. Date, the left hand side time is earlier than, later than, or the same time as the right hand side, so it's comparing the two. General filters such as contains, doesn't contain, in and empty, looking for a specific string, looking for a number, or there's other random ones as well. And then transformers, so for instance you can transform a date to a string and date to Unix, so that it can be picked up by other integrations or something like that, so into the form that requires. You can join, sort, splice or stringify, so in particular instance when looking at that, if we was to look at that one again just quickly, okay, so looking at that, if I wanted to get a list of that, that's what I've got there. Okay, so if I then go on to add a transformer to that. Okay, no, right, so let's show you. So that's that, okay, and that's what I come up with. However, if I add a transformer to split on a comma delimiter, contest, come back against the sample which was there, and then you can see I can then pick whichever one of them. So if I then add transformer to that, and then I want to get the index at index 2, testing, contest that, come back to that sample, and then threat, because I've got that at index 2 there. Okay, so that's the transformers and the filters. Basically, you'll use them within the classifications and mappings, instant types, anywhere where you're going to need to either normalize or you're going to need to transform data from one type to another. That's where you're going to do it. Okay, so the next video is instant types, indicator types, layouts and fields, and that's going to go more into configuring your own instant types, obviously, creating layouts, because the layouts are all configurable, they're all changeable. You can create layouts for your own purposes, or you can alter layouts just to provide the right amount of detail or the right amount of pertinent information to the analyst that's looking at it. And then again, that's fairly simple and easy to do, and actually creating the layouts is very quick. So then we'll go on through Layout Builder, and we'll go on through the settings and summarising relationships between external data and Cortex XSOAR instant types. So hopefully I'll see you there for that one.